Hi, I'm Dash. I'm a third-year computer science student, and this is my gallery, Negative Space. Um, in my free time, I'm a photographer, and I also do a bunch of other stuff. I do computer science things, I do game development, I do 3D art. And at work, I'm also a photographer for the AS, where I take a bunch of photos, none of which are in this gallery, unfortunately, but I still really enjoy what I do. I got a gallery because I heard that there were a couple of openings. They usually host about 4 openings a semester, and only 1 had been occupied. So I applied, which was actually really easy. I just had to fill out this form. I had to attach a bunch of photos that I wanted to include and write a brief statement about what my gallery was about. And after that, I got accepted pretty quickly. Putting up this exhibit has been a really fun experience because I've never gotten to do anything like this before. All of my photos have kind of existed in the digital realm, from when I've taken them to I've edited them and published them online. But getting to print everything out and figuring out how to organize a gallery and where to get everything printed and all the details of that has been really interesting. I also really enjoyed getting to do a reception, which is one of the features of the gallery up here, and that you get a free reception with free food, and all your friends and your family get to come. And everyone came up here, and it was a really great experience. Everyone was so nice, and everyone had great thoughts. Everyone really loved all the art. So I think it's been really rewarding to get to see what other people think about my art, because I don't really put myself out there. And it's been fantastic. Applying for the gallery was actually really fast. Once I heard that there were spots open, I started pulling up the application. The application itself is really easy. Probably the hardest part is that you have to get a sign-off from one of the members of the faculty. So I did, my boss, who's also a photographer. And then the other thing I had to put together was a collection of all the works that I wanted to show. And that was probably the most difficult thing, because I have a lot of different photos. It's not hard to take photos. The most difficult part was selecting exactly the ones that I wanted to put in the gallery and how they would all fit together. And then the last thing I had to do was writing an artist statement, which probably took me an hour, just laying out the details of why I picked these photos, why I chose these ones, where I took them, and kind of my thought process behind that. And overall, the whole thing was relatively easy and fast. The theme of this gallery is the same as its title. It's negative space. All these photos have a lot of negative space in them, which is something that's a little bit loosely defined, but it's essentially when you have shapes that are formed by the negative image of your subject. And I feel like that exemplifies a lot of what goes on in my work. A lot of it has lots of space that isn't the subject, lots of big skies, lots of kind of distant vistas that lets you, and the relief that those provide is really interesting. So all the photos that I felt had lots of negative space are the ones that I included. And I also have a bunch that don't really fit that, and maybe one of these days I'll put those in a second gallery. All these photos are from the course of the last 3 or 4 years, I want to say. I think the oldest one is in 2020, which is when I really started getting into photography. And they're from a bunch of different places. Quite a few of them are in Chico, just because that's where I've been in the last few years. But I also have a couple from other places in California, like San Francisco, which is my hometown, as well as places in Europe that I've been. Croatia, Greece, and Bosnia are 3. When I originally submitted the gallery, I came up with a bunch of, in hindsight, a bunch of cheesy names for the photos that I didn't really like. So when the time came to decide what names I wanted to put on them, I ended up going with just the places where they were taken. So there's photos, there's multiple photos in Chico. So there's one that's Chico trees, one that's Chico tanks, a bunch of vertical tanks. And then I also included the time and date they were taken because I thought that was interesting. The order in which these photos are hung isn't really that specific. I went for kind of a general, all the small photos are on one wall, all the big photos are on the other wall, but I did try to balance it out. The vertical one is in the middle here, and the horizontal ones are to the sides, but there's not really kind of a defined order. I did try to put photos that were similar to each other, next to each other, but it's not very strict. I probably have 2 favorite photos in this gallery. They're both the 2 big vertical ones. One of them is one I took in San Francisco at a time around about sunset when the tide was really high at Ocean Beach. And it's just a photo of this guy running along the beach. And he is perfectly silhouetted. He's entirely black. And the sand and the reflections around him are this kind of multicolored blue and green that I really brought out when I was editing it. And I didn't intend this originally, but a lot of people have come to me saying that it's almost a little bit of a trippy photo and that you can't tell which way the guy is running. I could never see that, but I think that's a really interesting element. My other favorite photo is the second big vertical one. It's all the way down at the end here, and it's of a warehouse in Chico, also right at sunset. But for this photo, it's a multiple exposure. I set the camera on a tripod, and I took photos where it was darker and then increasingly brighter, and then I merged those later. And what that lets me do is it lets me have lots of detail both in the shadows and in the highlights. So the sky in the photo is really pink, and there's also a puddle on the ground that's reflecting that. I think it's really nice to have that really bright sky, and also you can see all the detail in the shadows. I think it's a lovely composition. So all these photos were taken with the same camera. It's a Nikon D3300, which is a pretty entry-level DSLR from, I want to say, about 10 years ago. And I got it roughly about when it came out. That's when I was a lot younger and I was pretty into videography. I didn't even take very many photos. My first real entry into photography was when I applied for the job that I have with the AIS, which is as a photographer and videographer. And I realized I needed a portfolio, and I hadn't taken very many photos at all. So I went out with that camera and I took a bunch of photos around Chico, and I applied with that portfolio and I got in. And as I kind of kept going with my photography, I've slowly gotten a few more lenses. I originally started with the lens that comes with the camera, which goes from 18 to 55 millimeters. And I later got a 35 millimeter prime, which a couple of these, including the big vertical warehouse photo, was taken with. And then I also got a longer zoom. So it's all been the same camera, and I think one of these days I need to upgrade, but it's a couple of different lenses. If I had the time, I would totally do another exhibit in the gallery, just because I have so many other photos that I didn't get to include. I only picked 15 for this gallery, and I have tons that I culled that I didn't want to include because they didn't kind of match the theme. I think other artists should totally do a gallery up here. It's such a rewarding experience getting to show off your art. For me, like I've said, it's never been really kind of public. Nobody has really paid attention to it. So it's really rewarding to get your art kind of out there, to get other people to see it, to have the reception, which is fantastic. And also I'm hoping that someone decides they want to buy some of the photos. So if anyone else out there wants to put their art up here, I'd totally encourage them to. But other than that, that's all I have to say. Oh, do you want me to introduce myself? Okay. You just say rolling and you're pointing like...
My bad.